Okay, good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome all of you to our presentation today. This is the importance of processes and its importance to the interaction, rather, of processes and its importance to a successful audit. My name is Joseph Krolikowski. I am the QMS Program Manager for Perry Johnson Registrars. Couple of notes for our participants today. All of you are on mute, but we absolutely want to address your questions. So we ask that you use the question portion of the dashboard. I'll be going through any questions that we have at the end of our presentation. One of the more common questions that we get is whether or not the presentation will be made available after we're finished. We do make our webinars available in two ways. Firstly, if you'd like to get a copy of the slides, we do provide those for download free of charge on our website on PJR.com. And if you'd like to rewatch this webinar with the voiceover or perhaps share it with a colleague, we do have all of our webinar recordings posted to our YouTube page. And the link for that can be found on PJR.com as well. And I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague, Isabel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Isabel Perry. I'm going to be your moderator. I have a quick poll for everyone to take. We'll just run for a few seconds. We appreciate your responses. Okay, thank you everyone for those responses. Now Joseph will take it away discussing today's topic.
Thank you, Isabel. So our topics for today are going to be as followed. We're going to have a bit of background on why this is an important requirement, why we're having this discussion, if you will. We're going to tie this in with some requirements from ISO 9001. We're going to talk about both what is and what is not a process. We have some suggestions on meeting this requirement if you have an existing IOP that is not quite satisfactory. We've also got some examples to share that have been used by other companies in the past. And we're going to talk a bit about the impact of outsourced processes. So a bit of background here. A little over a decade ago, we were given a mandate by our accreditation bodies. We were told that we needed to start taking a harder line on our assessment of client interaction of process or IOP documents. Now, PJR, as I'm sure you're aware, we are an accredited certification body. And that means that we're held accountable to a number of different requirements. Probably the most prominent and important of these is the ISO 17021 series of standards. There is a clause within those documents that reads as follows: an audit program for the full certification cycle shall be developed to clearly identify the audit activities required to demonstrate that the client's management system fulfills the requirements for certification. Now, the interpretation of this is that we are expected to ensure that our auditors perform and document their audits in such a way that they are a reflection of the client's management system, your management system. Now, where this gets a bit more difficult is if we don't have a good representation of what your management system is. And again, the interpretation is that the interaction of processes, the IOP, is the reflection of what is your management system. After all, as we'll see, that's what ISO 9001 and the other related standards all say, is that you need to determine what are the processes that make up your management system. So we have to adhere to your interaction of processes, and only your interaction of processes, in completing the audit report, preparing the audit plan, and so forth. Now, if those documents don't do an effective job of identifying the processes, our job becomes exceedingly difficult. So we have instructed our auditors, we teach our auditors to issue nonconformances to any clients that have an IOP that does not identify the processes in an appropriate or effective manner. So let's start by tying this back to ISO 9001 itself, since the majority of people that join us for this webinar are ISO 9001 certified. There are 3 clauses in play that we refer to in terms of where this process model comes from. And they all tie back to Section 4. In 441, it says the organization shall determine the processes needed for the quality management system. So this is where we tie this in and say, well, a quality management system is made up of processes. That's where that idea comes from. In 441B, it states that the organization shall determine the sequence and interaction of its processes. And then in 442, it says the organization shall maintain documented information to support the operation of its processes. So these 3 clauses taken together are what we look to for this requirement. You have to determine what your processes are, how they sequence, how they interact, and you need to have something documented as a reflection of that. Now, in terms of what is a process, for this we would look to the official definition of process from the ISO 9000 document. ISO 9000, of course, is the fundamentals and vocabulary document, and it's used as a binding requirement in our ISO 9001 and in other section, other scheme, audits. So ISO 9000 defines process as a set of interrelated or interacting activities that use inputs to deliver an intended result. Now, that definition obviously is very purposeful. It establishes that a process is not a single step. It's a series of activities focused on a shared goal. That's why they have this verbiage about interrelated or interacting activities. Now, in terms of what we typically see as process designations, well, I've got a couple of examples on the screen here. We see sales often, we see purchasing often, we see production often, and so forth. Now, obviously, the intention is that your interaction of processes has to reflect what you have concluded your processes actually are. Now, if you come to us and say that your quality management system is made up of 4 processes, fine. If that is how you have structured your quality management system, if you've taken a very simple, straightforward approach to it, that is completely okay. Now, in terms of what is not a process, let's kind of unpack what isn't a process. Well, the interaction of process documents that are most often going to be problematic are going to be sometimes the ones that present steps within a single process. So here's an example. Let's say that we have an IOP that has steps such as create a work order, issue a production schedule, package a product, ship a product. These are potentially parts of a single process, but in all likelihood, they are not processes unto themselves. We've also seen IOPs that present sections from the applicable standard as the organization's processes. Think about it. Do you really have a process that you call resource management? Or is that really a section from ISO 9001? Any of the IOPs that bear these types of items are going to typically result in a nonconformance being issued during the audit. Now, if you have an existing interaction of process document and you've been told that it doesn't quite meet the expectations for an IOP, we have a strategy that we think can be helpful for you. And we want to kind of walk you through how you can leverage this so that you can keep your IOP as rendered, but at the same time, you can have it be a better representation of what your processes are. So what we're going to do, we're going to review a sample of an interaction of processes document and improve it in two key ways. We're going to start with the raw interaction of processes. Now, for this particular example, this example was developed for this presentation. This is not taken from any particular PJR client. Although we've noticed that some of our clients have actually ended up using something very similar to this. Okay, so here is the raw interaction of processes. Now, as you can see here, there are 12 process steps and 2 decision diamonds. Now, upon reading this, again, the question we need to ask is, are these 12 separate and distinct processes? For example, is order entered into mainframe system a process unto itself? Is the inspection of products prior to shipment a process unto itself? Might be, but looking at the IOP this way, we are left with some questions as to which of these steps are standalone processes, which of these steps make up parts of a process. So the first thing that we're going to do with this raw IOP is we're going to add a place for it to reference support processes. Now, ISO 9000 and ISO 9001, they don't draw any particular distinction between classification of processes. This is something that we have observed other companies doing, and they use it typically as a placeholder for some of the ISO specific things that you are required to do. So for example, management review, internal auditing, training, corrective action. These are things that you're doing within your quality management system, but they don't really belong with any of the core processes such as we were looking at on the prior screen. So let's go ahead and apply this first improvement to this raw IOP. Okay, so as you can see in the lower right-hand corner, we've added a large box that is addressing the support processes and kind of putting them all in one space. And obviously the intention is that these support processes act as a support to the rest of the activity. Training is something that affects everything. The internal audit is supposed to touch on everything, and so forth. So now we've got kind of the ISO specific pieces, the support pieces represented as well. Now, the other thing we're going to do to improve this IOP is we're going to create an IOP key. Now, this is a very common strategy that we've seen for this particular issue. It's a way of identifying what are the processes. Usually this is done through numbering or alpha characters. For this particular test model, we're going to be using color. Again, the advantage here is that it enables the IOP to stay as is, but it serves the quality management system and the audit process by identifying what are the processes. So let's apply this further improvement. Okay, so we now see that there are actually 6 processes in play here. The items in orange, for example, are sales order entry. Items in yellow are part of a process called production. Of the original raw IOP items, the only one that was a standalone process unto itself was shipping. Everything else had a minimum of 3 pieces that made up what was within that process. So we've made 2 small adjustments here. We've kept the content of the IOP just as it was before, but it now identifies support processes and it tells us what the company's actual processes are. This is an IOP that is now ready for audit assessment. Now, there are many ways that you can accomplish this, and over the years we have seen many different approaches that organizations use in rendering their IOP. And we've gathered some of these examples together to present as part of our webinar. Now, in all cases, the company names have been redacted, and the companies in question did grant us permission to share this as part of our presentation. So this is our first example. Follows kind of a top-down flow. I think the idea is that once the product has shipped, you route back up to the first process with contracting. But as you can see, this follows a very linear path. Contracts leading to raw materials being purchased, leading to the product being engineered, and so forth. Obviously, off to the left, we have the support process box, kind of indicating support, cumulative support to all of the different items on the right. So this is another very straightforward IOP, and this would absolutely be acceptable in the context of an audit. This is a somewhat more complicated IOP. Whoever put this together obviously wanted to reflect that there is quite a bit of interface between some of these processes. For example, you'll note that the overhaul process seems to interact with just about everything, with the exception of the shipping process. The quoting process seems to interact with 2 of the main processes. So that's part of what this is intended to reflect. Over on the left, we have a management-related item. That's intended to kind of take the place of what we were calling support in some of the other models. The other thing that I like to point out here is the uniqueness of a couple of these process names. Overhaul, that's a very unique process name. Inventory management, a somewhat unique process name. This is a company that definitely took some time to think about what are the processes that make up who we are, what are the activities within our management system. This is an interesting model of processes. This is typically referred to as the swim lane model. And where this can be helpful is if you have processes that have beginning points that are independent of each other. And that's kind of what's going on with the sales and purchasing process. These are steps that are related. These processes do have interface, as you can see, but they start independently of each other. In this model, the sales process begins when an order is received from the customer. And in the purchasing process, it begins with a review of available inventory. And then they kind of meet in the middle when they both then flow into the production area. Purchasing with receiving of purchased items, and sales with the issuance of the work order. So again, it's another way of indicating what the processes are. You'll note, obviously, along the bottom, we have various support processes that are called out. And again, the intention is that these act as support for the other 3 core processes up top. Here's another model of how you can represent what your processes are. We have a explanatory box telling us that anything in yellow highlight is a core process, and everything else should be considered support. So this particular organization has 6 processes. They've got the 5 core processes that are outlined in yellow, and then a 6th process, which we would refer to as support, which is made up of everything else. Now, the other item that I like to point out here, again, is the naming that's used for some of these processes. How many companies have a process that they refer to as distribution? How many companies have a process that they refer to as service exchange, and so forth? So again, it's important that the process names be as personal to you and your organization as possible. Now, I'd like to talk briefly about outsourced processes. Now, many of the clients that we have worked with have processes that are outsourced to an external provider. Now, an external provider, that term, that's defined as a provider that is not part of the organization. It's an inclusive term, and it refers to subcontractors, partner companies, parent companies, etc. We actually have a whole separate webinar that addresses this topic of outsourcing, and that is our non-applicable clauses, permissible exclusions, exemptions presentation. If you haven't seen it, I would invite you to join us the next time it's presented live, or look for it on our YouTube page. So in terms of what are some possible outsourced processes, well, there's a lot of possibilities. Sometimes design is outsourced. Sometimes training gets outsourced. Sometimes calibration activity gets outsourced. So how does this factor into what we're talking about with the IOP? Well, let's go back to the requirements from ISO 9001 that are in play here. Like we talked about, 441 requires you to determine what your processes are that make up the quality management system. 841 requires that you maintain control over any outsourced processes. And 442 requires documented information supporting the operation of processes. Now, we've had some recent accreditation body feedback that has reinforced that this means the IOP must indicate what are the outsourced processes or provide some way for that to be determined. Now, you could use a special font. You could use some other indicator. You can choose to give outsourced processes their own place on the IOP. The approach that is taken is entirely up to you. In conclusion, we want to ensure that we are providing our clients with a value-added audit experience while meeting all applicable requirements. It is our hope that you will use the points of today's presentation to develop an even better understanding of what your processes are. We'd like to invite you to tune in for one of our other webinars. We have a very popular webinar on ISO 9001, Knowing What to Expect to Ensure a Stress-Free Audit. This is presented on a semi-annual basis, and it covers some of the more common issues that we see in ISO 9001 audits and what is expected for those areas. I mentioned our non-applicable clauses, permissible exclusions, exemptions presentation. Again, this is all about what can and cannot be exempted and how to approach that concept properly. And we have webinars on a variety of other topics, things like stage 1 auditing, ITF 16949, and so forth. If you'd like to be kept informed of the latest news automatically, the best way for you to do that is to visit our website at www.pjr.com. Go to the bottom of the page, enter your email address, click subscribe, and you will be opted in for automatic updates on changes to the standards, new webinars, and other helpful points of information. I do thank you all for your time and attention. I'm going to unlock the question portion of the dashboard and see if we have any questions today. Okay, excellent. If you have any later questions, definitely reach out to us at our group email address, which is pjr@pjr.com. Oh, we do have a question from Marcel Rock. How does AS 9100 standard differ from what was presented? Well, Marcel, I can't speak to that 100%. I do know that AS 9100 has strict requirements within it for knowing what your processes are. Among other things, the auditors are required to prepare what is referred to as the PEAR report, the Process Effectiveness Assessment Record, as part of their audit package. I would invite you to send us an email at PJR@pjr.com, and we will get that question answered for you by a member of our Aerospace Executive Committee. Okay, that appears to be it. Thank you all very much. Have a great day.